you should push yourself beyond your limits of tolerance in your 20s to find out where it is. How much can you work? How disciplined can you become? Like, can you work 12 hours a day? Can you work 8 hours a day? Can you work 3 hours a day? Like, flat out. Where's your limit? And how much work can you do, and how much socialization? You should find out. Push yourself past and then back off to that point where it's optimally sustainable.
That's what a lot of people do, isn't it? I mean, they party too much when they're in their 20s. They make a lot of mistakes.
It's what they're doing, and I would say in sort of a haphazard way, right? Because there's that instinct to go out there and do more,
right?
But it's unregulated, and it's not as self-conscious as it might be. It's good to know that it's good to think about that as a goal. It's like you're trying to discover what your limitations are when you're in your 20s, so that you can hit that edge, so that you can sustain yourself across the decades. And so, yeah, because you don't want to have too much fun, right? Too much fun takes you out. You don't want to be the oldest guy at the disco. You know, it's not fun being the 40-year-old at the singles bar, precisely. So you want to make sure that what you're doing is age appropriate, and you want to push yourself in every direction that you can, but you should be doing that with an aim in mind. It's like you're trying to make yourself into a better and more competent person. And so some discipline along with the fun is a good idea. So to take care of yourself and the people around you, that's one of the things I recommended to people, and I've had quite a few people actually tell me that they've done this. Interestingly enough, I said, well, one thing you could aim at, if you had any sense when you were young, is to be you could be the most reliable person at your father's funeral. And so I think that's a good challenge. And I had a bunch of people come up to me in this last tour and tell me that that's exactly what they did. These were often young guys, you know, like before 20. Said, my dad died suddenly, or, you know, he died after a year's illness, and it was just taking me out. And no wonder, you know. I said, I was listening to your lectures. You said you want to be the most reliable person at the funeral because everyone else is grieving, and what the hell else are you going to do? He said, that's what they tried to do, and that got him through it. No, that's part of that, picking up that load, as far as I'm concerned. You get a little self-respect out of that too, in a real sense, right? Because, you know, you're this sort of sad, suffering creature that's capable of a fair bit of malevolence, but if you find out that you can carry a heavy load and take care of yourself and have a little left over for some other people, then you can wake up at 3 a.m. and think, well, man, I could be worse. I had read this really interesting study in a book called The Neuropsychology of Anxiety by Jeffrey Gray, and it's a great book. It's a very, very difficult book, but it's a great book. He outlines hundreds of studies of animals in that book, and one of the studies was a technical study of motivation in rats. Let's say you want to motivate a rat. Okay, so first of all, you make him hungry, and he'll work for food. So then maybe you have him learn this maze. He has to run the maze to get the food reward, and so he runs it a few times. He knows there's food there, so you put him at the beginning of the maze and you let him go, and then you watch how fast he goes to the maze. Now, there's a couple of ways you can measure his motivation. You can attach him to a spring and have him pull against the spring, and then, you know, you get some estimate of how much work he's willing to put in to go down the maze, or you can time him. Okay, so now imagine you got your hungry rat and you let him go at the beginning of the maze, and he zooms up to get the food, and he's, you know, moving at like 10 miles an hour. But now you do something different. You put him in the same place, but as well as him being hungry and going after the food, you waft in a little bit of cat odor. Rats hate cats. They can't stand them. Even if they've never met a cat, they can't tolerate the odor. It really terrifies them. And so that rat will run towards that food much faster than he will if he's just hungry. And so, like, if you want to run towards something that you want, it's really useful to be running away from something you truly don't want. I thought about, so that's part of the reason we built that into the system. And I had a metaphysical take on that too, which is like many religious systems have a kind of notion of something like hell that's very well developed in Christianity. And so hell is where you end up when you lie. That's one way of thinking about it, in a very good way. You might think, well, is there any psychological utility in that idea? And the answer is, yeah. You need to know where you could end up if things went wrong, because then you're motivated by fear to move forward. If you're not motivated by fear to move forward, then your fear's in front of you, stopping you. Because you might think, oh my God, I can't take the risks necessary to attain these goals. What if something goes wrong? Well, it's like, yeah, well then you're frozen. But if you think, no, wait a second. There's risks to proceeding, but nothing compared to the risks of failing. So then the fear is behind you, pushing you forward. That's so you need a vision of hell. It's like, okay, what's your personal vision of hell? You let your life fall apart because of your own stupidity and your own blindness. It's like you're the worst place you could be in 5 years. Well, that's what we ask people to write about. Throughout your life, you have people you look up to. Okay, so let's think about that. You look up. What does that mean? Why up? Well, up is something that beckons from a distance. It's like a light on a hill, and we automatically assume that those who we admire are people we look up to. So that specifies a distance and a direction, and it's uphill. It's up toward a higher vista, let's say. So there are automatically people who elicit that spirit in you. You have noticed the way.
Might also imply that there's some sense of struggle required to get to that point, because it's easier to go downhill than it is uphill.
Yes, definitely. That's right. It's an uphill trek. And it also implies judgment, because if someone's above you, then they also serve as a judge, or you serve as a judge in relationship to them, because you compare yourself unfavorably with them. And that can also inspire you to tear them down. That's really the story of Cain and Abel, and that's a major story. You have noticed the way a teacher, parent, coworker, mentor, or friend interacts with others, and you come away thinking, that behavior simply works better. They are respected, admired, and successful. And you find yourself wondering why that is. You do if you're a little bit humble instead of being envious, right? Because otherwise you think, well, that damn crook, he just stole his position, and that's why he's got it. But if you're a bit humble, you might think, well, no, that guy looks successful. Maybe he knows something I don't. You are noticing attributes and character traits that are good and worth aspiring to. You are noticing attributes that make certain people more successful than others. You are noticing what a hero looks like. And in the process, you are discovering a path made up of desirable personality traits that helps you ascend in social hierarchies. That's Jacob's ladder, by the way. That ladder that is the hierarchy to the good. That's the vision Jacob has of the pathway to God, is that it's a hierarchical structure with the thing that's ultimately good at the pinnacle, by definition, right? The best of all possible goods. And then there are intermediary structures all the way up, and beings inhabiting those structures. And this isn't metaphysical. It's like if you find someone you admire, the reason you admire them is because they're higher up in that heavenly hierarchy, so to speak, than you are. And your whole nervous system tells you that. You're compelled to listen, you're compelled to pay attention by the action of your own unconscious mind. Underestimates the degree to which there's systemic oppression, etc., and the vagaries of fate. It's like it doesn't underestimate it. It's not the point. The point is your best strategic position is, how am I insufficient and how can I rectify that? That's what you've got. And the thing is, you are insufficient and you could rectify it. Both of those are within your grasp if you aim low enough. One of the things
Why do you see that's another thing you keep saying, aim low enough, have a low enough bar. Why do you mean that?
Well, let's say you've got a kid and you want the kid to improve. You don't set them a bar that's so high that it's impossible for them to attain it. You take a look at the kid and you think, okay, this kid's got this range of skill. Here's a challenge we can throw at him or her that exceeds their current level of skill, but gives them a reasonable probability of success. And so, like, I'm saying it tongue-in-cheek to some degree, you know, it's like, but I'm doing it as an aid to humility. It's like, well, I don't know how to start improving my life. Someone might say that. And I would say, well, you're not aiming low enough. There's something you could do that you are regarding as trivial, that you could do, that you would do, that would result in an actual improvement. But it's not a big enough improvement for you, so you won't lower yourself enough to take the opportunity.
Incremental steps.
Yes.
So this is also what is achieved through exercise. It's one of the most important.
Yeah. Well, what do you do when you go and lift weights?
Yeah.
You don't go and, like, if you haven't bench pressed before, you don't put 400 pounds on the damn bar and drop the bar through your skull.
Right.
You know, you think, look, when I started working out when I was a kid, I was weighed about 130 pounds and I was 6'1". I was a thin kid and I smoked a lot. I wasn't in good shape. I wasn't in good physical shape. And I went to the gym and it was bloody embarrassing, you know, and people would come over and help me with the goddamn weights. Here's how you're supposed to use this. You know, it was humiliating. And maybe I was pressing 65 pounds or something at that point. You know, but what am I going to do? I'm going to lift up 150 pounds and injure myself right off the bat? No, I had to go in there and strip down and put my skinny goddamn self in front of the mirror and think, son of a bitch, there's all these monsters in the gym who've been lifting weights for 10 years, and I'm struggling to get 50 pounds off the bar. Tough luck for me. But I could lift 50 pounds. And it wasn't very long until I could lift 75. And, well, you know how it goes. And I never injured myself when I was weightlifting. And the reason for that was I never pushed myself past where I knew I could go. And I pushed myself a lot. I gained 35 pounds of muscle in about 3 years in university. I kind of had to quit because I was eating so goddamn much I couldn't stand it. I was eating like 6 meals a day. It was just taking up too much time. But there's a humility in determining what it is that the wretched creature that you are can actually manage. Aim low. And I don't mean don't aim, and I don't mean don't aim up. But you have to accept the fact that you can set yourself a goal that you can attain, and there's not going to be much glory in it to begin with. Because if you're not in very good shape, the goal that you could attain tomorrow isn't very glorious. But it's a hell of a lot better than nothing, and it beats the hell out of bitterness, and it's way better than blaming someone else. It's way less dangerous. And you could do it. And what's cool about it, there's a statement in the New Testament. It's called the Matthew Principle, and economists use it to describe how the economy in the world works. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. It's like what's very pessimistic in some sense, because it means that as you start to fail, you fail more and more rapidly. But it also means that as you start to succeed, you succeed more and more rapidly. And so you take an incremental step, and, well, now you can lift 55 pounds instead of 52.5 pounds. You think, well, what the hell's that? It's like, it's one step on a very long journey. And so it starts to compound on you. So a small step today puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And then that puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And you do that for 2 or 3 years, man, you're starting to stride.